Hello everyone, it's lovely to have you all here. My name is Mei-Ying. I'm a third year economics and management student at King's College London. I am also the King's Business Club Keynote Project Lead. So this event has been specifically created for students who are starting out in their career journeys. You can find our past and our future webinars on our KBC YouTube channel. So today we are honoured to welcome Sarah Chen, Virginia Tan and Aleksandra Laksa, who will be sharing their experience as females in leadership and their advice for breaking into business. So please remember to make use of the Q&A feature of this keynote. I've seen that we've already got some great questions coming in. You can submit your questions throughout the discussion for our lovely speakers to address during question time. So I'm going to hand over to our guests to introduce themselves. So Aleksandra, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm Aleks. I'm a partner at a VC fund, Redalpine. We're based out of Zurich, but we invest across Europe in early stage companies in tech and life science. My background is I actually graduated with a law degree in 2008 from King's College, then pursued a career in finance in an investment bank before I joined the forces with some pretty incredible tech companies in an operational role. And since last year, I'm a VC investor.
Perfect. Thank you. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Mei-Ying. And really, so proud and honored to be back here at the alma mater. Virginia and I were just joking that we forget, we do business together, but we forget that we both had the common ground of King's. So, all of you students tuning in, you're in the right place, although all of us admittedly did not pursue law in the end, although we're all law students. I think it opens up a lot of great things for you as a foundation. And, I definitely don't regret it, definitely use it a lot. So my name is Sarah Chen. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of the $1 Billion Fund for Women, also known as Beyond the Billion right now. We're a global consortium of venture capital funds and limited partner investors that invest into those venture capital funds that have pledged and are actively deploying over $1 billion towards female founders globally. When I started, I thought, I wanted to be a big corporate lawyer. Baker McKenzie was an internship that I truly enjoyed, but really also opened my eyes when I was working in Chicago to how excited I was to be really on the client side, right? Working with the entrepreneur. And that really, I was also in the founding team of the King's College London Business Club. So I think I had early signs of the entrepreneurial bug, and it hasn't left me since. Went to work in a family business for a while, and then after that worked with a large conglomerate in Malaysia. So that was a 13 billion conglomerate, still is, and we were starting out a corporate venture capital unit at that time, so investing into late stage biotechnology that would be strategic investments for the company. And then I moved to the United States, and along the way, we'll get into it a little bit, but I saw that there was a lot more to be done with women in leadership, and that it should be mainstream. So, despite the introduction, I hope, you all see us as leaders first and foremost. That so happen to be women kicking ass and doing great things. So, my two passions and two key beliefs of getting women into leadership and, fueling women's ambition, power, and influence has come into the work that I'm doing right now, which is to bring venture capital and really bridge the gender venture funding gap strategically. So I'll pause there and we'll get into it later on, I'm sure, Mei. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us today. Virginia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am also a King's Law School graduate of 2006. I see the common trend here. And yes, I actually did become a corporate lawyer first. So I did about 10 years in law and banking. I started out my career actually in London, just down the road from our college. I was at Allen & Overy, and then in London, and then moved to the Royal Bank of Scotland in Dubai, and then moved to Clifford Chance in Beijing. So I did do my time and utilize that law degree. I am now the founding partner of Teja Ventures, which is an early stage technology venture capital fund focused on what we call technology for the female economy and out of emerging Asia. I'm based out of Singapore. I also founded what has now become the world's largest startup competition for women in technology. And actually, the way my life was turned upside down was that while I was in China, I've been in China the last 7 years. Now I'm based in Singapore. I basically started a community called Lean in China, which has now become one of China's best known nonprofit communities for women. And coincidentally, that's actually how I met Sarah, who had actually started Lean in Malaysia at the time. And then from there, we started the startup competition. Once, the first time, in 2015, it was 10 entrepreneurs on the stage. As of last year, we're in more than 30 countries across the world, 5,000 startups. And this year we're going to go to probably 40 or 50 countries. So my journey into venture capital was an unusual one. I was I started to angel invest because top-notch investors were investing into the companies out of my competition. And then it soon became clear to me that I had to build my own fund. If Sequoia, Amazon, Temasek was all investing, then, I should be too. So unexpected or accidental investor, I would say.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. So we're now going to move on to the questions that we've received over from Instagram. So first up, we have a question for Sarah. It's well known that there is a lack of funding for women founders. What has been your personal journey funding the $1 billion fund for women? I know that you've recently, you surpassed the $1 billion mark, which is amazing. How did you overcome any setbacks?
Oh, thanks for that question. I think the number one thing that I've learned, and if there's something that I would impart here, is to never forget to ask for help. And we were really quick in hitting our goal of $1 billion, dreaming big, first of all, with the help of many great partners, including people like Virginia Tan, who was actually our first pledgee to the $1 billion fund for women when we were just putting together the idea, really, and the idea was back then, for those of you who may not know, the gender venture funding gap in terms of how much venture capital goes into female teams, it's 2.2% when we started, right? So it's about 2%. And if you include gender diverse teams, where there's at least one female founder in the team, that goes up to 10 to 12%. And during the time of COVID, we've actually taken steps back and we did a report recently with PitchBook last year, which showed that funding to female founders declined by 31% as compared to 16% for all male teams during the time of a pandemic. And that is telling of the fact that, first of all, in the later stages where there's already a lot of dominance in certain all male teams, a lot of venture capitalists are, as they should be, re-upping, i.e. reinvesting into their current portfolio to make sure they thrive and continue to succeed. But that means that, it becomes a little bit of a barrier for certain new entrants, which could include female founders. And, that's one thing that we're trying to address here. So, I think for us, it was really about mobilizing a really global group. So we worked with, by the time we hit the $1 billion mark, which we announced in Paris, we had a consortium of over 73 funds at that time. So of course, we did not do this alone. It's with the help of many venture capital funds to say, the pipeline of great women entrepreneurs and female innovators is there, and we're ready to deploy the capital, and we're doing that through our funds. So it's not through a single entity itself, but it's through the work of a collective of funds, and we're investing across the board. And by the way, women are innovating across the stages in AI, blockchain, clean tech, fintech, ag tech, you name it. And we have funds investing into these different groups and across the different stages. And, it is our goal now is beyond the billion, hence the shift of the name is as we reach the $1 billion mark to ensure that the next level of challenges, unfortunately, is addressed, which is the fact that even venture capitalists like Virginia are working hard to fund the female founders, they too need to be funded as a VC. So we talk about the limited partner investors that invest into these funds. That's our sweet spot. So I work really with a lot of CIOs, the pensions, the financial institutions and beyond to say the time is now. We want to have diversity in our money managers because that reflects, our beliefs, and they continue to outperform. The good news is female founders last year, despite the bad news of the decline in funding, they're outperforming in every metric except for funding in terms of exits. So female founders are exiting quicker and at higher valuations, which is an important metric for private investors. So that's a long way to say, there's a lot to do here, but we did it with a lot of great help from great people around the world that believed in the mission, that were aligned and clear that this is business, right? We're talking about what's good for business here. We're talking about outperformance. And if you leave out 50% of the population, you're missing out on all the great innovation. I mean, talk about COVID-19 right now. Dr. Kathleen Carrico was the brain behind mRNA that's really helping us emerge beyond this crisis. So imagine if we overlooked someone like her, and she was overlooked for the last couple of years, and more than that. So I really encourage you all to, really think deeply about some of the systems and structures that are in place here that unfortunately hold certain groups back, including women. But the fact that is, it's so necessary.
No, definitely. And I think going back to what you said about asking for help, while these students are still at university, make the most of asking for help and using these networks. Aleksandra, we've got a question for you. So you previously built the corporate business at Improbable, now a unicorn company that has raised over $600 million in funding. How did you get started in the industry, and were you part of any networks that helped you build up experience? And what is the key to a successful pitch deck?
Oh, very different questions on very diverse topics. So maybe the first one I will try to tackle first. So how did I get into, I guess the question is into entrepreneurship or into startups. So I started my career in a very corporate environment as well, not in law necessarily, but in finance. And I was very lucky enough to have quite an entrepreneurial role within that organization at the time, towards the end of me being there. And this sort of sparked my interest in entrepreneurship and tech. And actually, at the time, I was told, so firstly, startups I had no idea about. And I just decided I'm just going to make one myself. So I co-founded a fintech company, and it all sort of snowballed from there. So after doing that, I spent a little bit of time at a VC fund. And this is how I came across Improbable, actually. They came to us for funding. And I always laughed that they didn't get the check, but they got me instead. So I spent 5 years at the company. And at the time, so I think that the way I went about going or breaking into tech and startups is by just talking to a lot of people. So I think that you will find your network is much broader than you probably think. And there will always be someone from your network who either went through the same journey as that you want to do. And, I had a few friends who worked with me at the time on the trading floor and then left to pursue other opportunities. And I would just catch up with them over coffee, ask them questions, ask them for other introductions, just friendly coffee chats, and I find that this is a very powerful way to meet people and learn and be prepared and then figure out what you want to do next. So this is how I went about it, but a lot of it was also luck, and I just fell into it by sheer chance. So I would answer that in that way. And what makes a good pitch deck? I think that's we could talk about this for an hour, but for me, at least, the best pitch decks are those that are very punchy. So they're to the point. So they're very informative, but not too text heavy. So it's easy to digest all the information and sort of maneuver your way through it. And you have to keep in mind to always include all the most important information in it. And that ranges from what is your actual vision, what problem are you actually solving, how big is the market, through to who is your team, what is your financial plan, and what is the actual structure of the round that you want to do. So I would say informative but punchy. You have to think about VC investors looking at hundreds and hundreds of pitch decks all the time. So keep it simple, to the point, informative, and make sure that whatever is the most important thing, which in my opinion, for instance, is the vision statement of the company, what it is that you're actually trying to do, is right at the beginning before you go into the more nitty-gritty at the end.
Perfect. That's a brilliant answer. Thank you. So, Virginia, it's important to encourage females to reach their potential. And a few of our followers were wondering how you started your journey in the field of technology. And much like finance, it's an area that's typically male dominated. And have you ever had to deal with imposter syndrome?
Great question. So first and foremost, I want to say that 7 years ago when I first moved to China, I didn't even know how to use an iPhone. So I want to put it out there, just in case, you thought I was like some tech guru. I am not. Okay. And the first thing I want to say is that technology, at the end of the day, is a platform. there is an instrument. It's meant to make our lives, better, most of the time, I think, and we should see it as such. I think, like most people, I was probably quite intimidated by technology. Just moving from BlackBerry to Apple iPhone, was a big deal for me. But I think this is what I want to say. My journey into technology was accidental. I moved to China, and China's obviously the biggest consumer market in the world, and in many ways, just in terms of pure digitalization, they leapfrogged the PC era, went straight into mobile. It's still the largest market in the world where you can build and scale mobile applications, and in terms of the consumer adoption. So in many ways, my technology journey has been learning by doing, and I want to say that because I feel like that's what I hope young people are hearing. Just because technology is a word, is a long word, right? Doesn't mean that should be an impediment into you getting into it. And I think my journey very much was, I built a community. The community had certain needs. We built a platform. We built a technology competition, and that was my real interaction with technology. It was actually working with entrepreneurs who I respected, who were building technology, and which took me time to understand. I ended up building some technology products myself, for my nonprofit at the time, and then through being an angel investor first, and I think everybody on this call is actually part of the King's Angel Investment Network right now. Just from being an investor, the first company I ever invested in was a car company in Africa, of all the things in the world, right? Second one was a digital sort of food app, out of Singapore. And third and fourth companies I was an angel in, essentially got warehoused into my current fund, Teacher Ventures. So I would say learning by doing. And I'm not somebody, unfortunately, who likes to go to school. I'm not the kind of person who necessarily would do an MBA in technology or so on and so forth. So my best experience really was through the ecosystem. I had a lot of friends who were either CTOs, they were innovators, they were building tech. And I sat there and I learned from them. I discussed ideas. I asked them for their opinions. I read a lot. I used to go to Israel a lot to learn about artificial intelligence, so on and so forth. So I want to put it out there to everybody because just because you don't have a tech background doesn't mean that you can't be an investor or you can't interact with technology. In terms of imposter syndrome, I think yes, I believe I did have an imposter syndrome. I think early in my career, even when I was a lawyer, there trying to negotiate all kinds of things, look cool, when I was just really young, and then later on it's definitely taken me a while to build up my own credibility and confidence as an investor. So when I first started Teacher Ventures, I knew I had to do it, but I didn't necessarily feel like I was good enough in the beginning, and I think I had to build it up. But sometimes the best learning comes from the journey. And obviously, I had a background in law and finance, so it makes my journey as an investor actually, in a way, much easier because I have a lot of those basics. But there's nothing that you can't learn. And I would, to the young people on this call, I would go out there with that attitude, soak up everything, learn, talk to entrepreneurs, find out what they're doing. If you don't understand, ask again, ask people around you. I like I said, no one taught me about investing either. Right? I had to learn it. So seek that advice. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. That kind of links in with a question that we've just been sent on YouTube. So a few of our viewers are also law graduates, and they were wondering how you made the shift from law to business. So were you doing night classes? Was it the networking that you're doing? How did you market yourself as an entrepreneur with a law degree? I know having a scholarship is also great, the Dickson Poon scholarship. That shows that you're academic and you work hard, but was there anything that you did what would be your advice for a law undergraduate?
Yeah, Mei-Ying, if I may address, some of the points that both Aleksandra and Virginia has put out there, both of them mentioned luck. And I really hear this often, a lot of entrepreneurs say, there's some level of luck, but don't be mistaken. These women have worked their asses off, make no mistake, to put themselves in the position to be very lucky. So I think, sometimes we don't give us enough credit, ourselves enough credit, but I've seen Virginia's journey. Heck, she works. She's the hardest working person I know, doesn't sleep. I don't know how she works. Even I'm a workaholic, but she, for her to say lucky, I want to take that away from her, because she's really working so hard that she deserves. And she's put herself up to in a position to be lucky. And I think that's a very important message. I think there's some element of that, but also remember the concept of seeding, right? Although you don't see it today, you're planting all these seeds that will, some of these plants are big trees. They take a longer time. So don't forget about that. And also on imposter syndrome. In fact, I was on KCLSU, I don't know, weeks ago, about imposter syndrome as well. And the reality, and I encourage a lot of young people on here to also read this article by Harvard Business Review. Maybe I'll put it on the chat later on. But the topic of the article is Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. Because the reality is the concept of imposter syndrome, sure, we all have self-doubt, right? Especially if we're doing something new. And the reality is if you're doing something new, you're going to be uncomfortable, which causes that self-doubt. So, it is going to happen, but to call out the imposter syndrome and sort of place the blame on a woman. Virginia and I go way back with Lean In. So I started Lean In Malaysia. So I feel very strongly about this. I think our narratives to young women is so important. And the concept of imposter syndrome was in the 70s, when the concept of xenophobia, systemic racism, all these things were not fully understood yet. So of course, people like us who are people of color and, may not have fit into certain models and patterns of success, would feel that way, because in certain experiences, we were made to feel like we didn't belong. So I want to put that out there. But, then going to your question on transitioning into business, I think for me, it started in university, right? So I started King's College London Business Club with a couple of folks, because I was frankly a little bit, wanting a little bit more stimulation beyond just going through the letter of the law. I was always more creative in a certain way. So I started by being the only one of few law students that joined the business club. And I really enjoyed the diversity of the different students from the different courses. So of course, if you're in university right now, I really encourage you to step out of your cliques that you're used to and sort of learn from other people, because I learned a great deal. I mean, I didn't know back then how I would fall into venture capital, but I started in school, right? The idea box competition. We had students put in ideas. Jack Smith, who had a huge exit, we were putting together, like literally put a box out there in Strand or Waterloo for students to put their ideas in, and there was like lecturer fight club and all this, all these fun stuff. But that's how you get your ideas, and I think it starts from really testing it out, right? So we were working in school in different environments where it was, especially as a student, you have a lot more, I guess people give you a pass, so don't take that lightly, use this time to experiment and learn, and that's a great way. And then beyond that, I think, like Virginia said, just moving on to build your credibility and putting yourself in places which will give you that experience to then say, yeah, you know what, I did not study business, but I'm learning by experience, and a lot of it is, having that bias to action to learn and gain experiences from there. So I think there's a little bit of a, shift of, as much as you're branding yourself, I think you need to do the work as well. And I think for me, even though I was very, very young when I was, working on big deals and helping to put together the signing of like a $30 million deal, I was learning from some really great people across the table that helped me advance. And that's what I would advise everyone to do as well.
That's brilliant. Did you have anything on that, Aleksandra?
Yeah, I mean, what I would add to that is, firstly, so I studied law and I wanted to go into finance. So I did a little bit of a transition twice, and then I went into finance, and then I wanted to leave finance and go into startups and tech. So I had to sort of maneuver my way around that. And I would say that actually studying law, for example, it's a really wonderful foundation for any kind of career. I mean, I use what I learned during my law degree all the time. I think it helps to learn how to critically analyze certain problems, and it doesn't have to be a contract or legal jargon. It can be a business problem, for example. It helps you to think in a very structured way, which I think makes conversations and analysis much easier. So firstly, I would sort of focus on what it brings to the table, no matter what you want to do later, rather than how do I maneuver myself out of being pigeonholed. So I think that's the first thing I would say. But the second thing is, I think that what employers or, potential investors will look at is, have you shown an interest in the space whilst you were at university with extracurricular, for example? And Sarah has mentioned a few things that she has done at King's. I have also set up the King's College Polish Society, which has nothing to do with business per se, but it's somewhat entrepreneurial. I mean, it takes initiative. I was also part of the Entrepreneurs Club. And at the time, I actually had no idea what VC was. Tech was not a thing, or it wasn't that sort of omnipresent in Europe, at least. And at the time, I focused predominantly on finance. So I did a lot of sort of workshops and internships and work experience in that field, to sort of just to show that it's something that I'm interested in, and I'm willing and happy to take out some of my free time to pursue those interests and learn more about them. So, but I really wouldn't undermine the skills you learned during your degree. I think that they can be absolutely used in any sort of sector, and especially in finance. I mean, they hired people who were surgeons. Because they're obviously intelligent, obviously they're hardworking. So I think these are sort of transferable skills that no matter what you studied will be important in any sort of successful career.
No, definitely. I think that's a good point. In a lot of companies now are not just looking for finance people, they're looking for people with different degrees, because it's the diversity. It's everybody thinks differently on a different degree. You don't want, everyone coming up with the same problems and the same issues. We had another question. So you've all had very successful careers, founding amazing companies, and there's been a lot of in the press, there's been loads of articles coming out about morning routines recently on social media and things like this. So previously we've had guests mention about taking cold showers in the morning. I was just wondering if any of you had a special morning ritual. So Aleksandra, do you want to start?
My morning routine is a coffee.
If it works.
But I'm actually quite a morning person. So I like to wake up fairly early and read the news or go through my emails before the chaos of, people reaching out to you all the time starts. So when I wake up, I just like to have a coffee, read the news, take a shower, but nothing particularly special. I think what has helped though with the home office setup during the pandemic is that you spend less time on commuting and more time on using the time productively. So whether it's maybe meditation for a few minutes or yoga or some stretching, I sometimes do a little 15-minute walk outdoors. So I'm not stuck in the house all the time. And I think it sets you up really nicely for the day. So, but nothing particularly extraordinary for me, I'm afraid.
No 5 a.m. starts. That's it.
No, 6 is okay. I did the 5 a.m. starts when I was on the trading floor. I put them behind me.
Happy to say goodbye to those.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you have any morning ritual?
Yeah, I guess I'm your, a bit of your wild card character here, but I have some routines, but 5 a.m. cold showers, that's not for me. I'm too much of a wuss for that. But I highly respect that. I think, kudos to all of you doing that. Definitely want to try it once in your life, but not for me. I think I've passed that, but I do wake up and I do this abundance meditation for 15 minutes with Deepak Chopra. So that's one thing I do. And then I actually do yoga. So at least 20 minutes a day, I do yoga or some sort of exercise. And now, time of work from home, it's me watching a YouTube video and jumping in front of Pamela Rive or Boho Beautiful. So those are my two favorites on YouTube right now.
That's really good. That's nice to know that. But so far, both of you two have mentioned meditation. Is that the same for you as well, Virginia? Or Early starts,
Okay.
meditation?
So unfortunately, sorry to disappoint. I am not an early bird at all. Hate the mornings. I am actually a night bird. Actually, Sarah, I sleep a lot more now these days. Now that I'm back in Singapore, but Sarah's absolutely right. Yeah, I didn't sleep for, I think, for a long time. So actually, no. The morning rituals I like to do these days is like, I think morning rituals are all about being good to yourself. You know, the way you want to nourish yourself in the first part of the day. So what I like to do is actually take a hot shower, you know, with like a great scrub, with a great scent. I love scents. And I do a little bit of a cleanse, you know, like an aloe vera cleanse, just something to start the day, you know. And I would say, you know, just really nourish yourself. Yeah.
Perfect. So another question that we had for you was regarding the best piece of advice a mentor has given you over your career. I know that's quite a hard one to chuck on you to think of a quote, but do you have anything, Virginia, that comes to mind?
Yeah, actually, I remember this very, very clearly, and it actually ties in a lot with what Aleks and I think Sarah were saying about, about how how you transition, from the earlier question, which is how do you transition from law to business, right? The mentor said to me, Virginia, always transition from a position of strength. And, and I was making one of my transitions at the time, moving from London to China, actually. The two things I wanted to say, on actually that earlier question. I think when you do something for a very long time, so I was a lawyer for almost 10 years, right? So you're made to think actually that you can only do that one thing. But I think the beauty with something like law at the end of the day is that never ever get caught up in the fact that and think that you're just a contract pusher, right? At the end of the day, law is not just about analysis skills, but at the end of the day, what you're really doing is understanding how to manage risk. And that actually puts you in an extremely great position when you are, in a power, negotiating deals. What I loved about being a lawyer, I was actually one of those people who loved being a lawyer. Actually, is actually how to be a great commercial negotiator, right? How do you get a deal done? The best part of my job is actually being a deal maker. And the second piece I would say is that I think it is actually about relationships. If you want to go into business, one of the most important things is about building trust and relationships, and that has literally nothing to do about the degree that you do. And so I think when my mentor actually said transition from a position of strength, I wanted to move to China and then go into microfinance actually. And he said, actually go to China, stay with law, use that to build relationships and credibility and trust. And instead of trying to change everything at a go. And that's what I would tell any young person who's looking to make a transition,
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Thank you. Sarah, do you have any advice that a mentor has given you that stuck with you?
This is a hard one, but I was taking notes. So if I would advise anything, I think always be learning. Like even now, even though I've known Virginia, I'm always learning from her. Even now speaking with her, there's always transition from a position of strength. I really like that. It's a good reminder. One thing that really, I think we evolve as people over time, and sort of, what sticks with you also, it reflects your chapter in your life, right? But one thing that really stuck with me most recently was when my mentor said to me, and I asked the question, how long do you stick at something? How do you know it's time to give up if it's not working out? And he said to me, if it's something you truly believe in, and if you think back about, would you regret not trying your hardest and trying one last time in the ring, then continue doing it. I think it's hard, right? This sort of decision, like especially in a time of business where there's a lot of uncertainty and things like that. But so his advice to me was, if you really believe in something, there is no end to trying for that one thing. But and this is something that I add on, but I think take a break from the mission, take a break from the day, come back to the mission. If it's something you believe in, keep going at it and don't give up and persist, because the most successful people are not necessarily the most talented or the smartest. And by now, I think I've seen a lot of chapters with even different people in startups and things like that. And it really, truly isn't the fact that they have the best the most novel idea. It's about their persistence to execute with precision and continue and persist. So I think that would be my advice and my favorite for now.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And yes, Aleksandra.
So mine is probably very similar to what Sarah just said, but it's mostly not to be afraid of risk and be resilient. So I have changed careers. If you look at the sectors twice or three times, if you include my law degree, I went from being an operator in a startup to an investor and vice versa. And I think that it has created a very interesting career path for me. I have experienced such amazing things. I have met such interesting people. I have learned so much. I feel like if I was too afraid to take that step of change and transition, I wouldn't grow as much as I have grown through those changes. And sometimes you might end up somewhere where it's not ideal. I mean, it sounds really great now from, the perspective of 14 years or however long we've been working for, but sometimes you have to sort of pivot and maybe change direction slightly. But I think that's all a learning curve. And I always say, you ask me how I ended up in startups or how I got there. Very often it's the journey, not the actual, end station, so to speak. And a lot of the things that I did in between led me to ultimately being where I am now. So I would also advise just to not be scared of risks. And I think if you do something that you're really passionate about or are interested in, then you will do it very well and you will be successful in it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's brilliant advice from all three. So this kind of links on from the last question, but it was if any of you had any book recommendations. So whether that's life advice books, life help books, or finance books, or VC books. If there was one book that stood out to you that you would have to recommend someone, what book would you recommend? Sarah,
mine would be.
That's sorry. Virginia, you go.
No worries. Mine would be No Rules by Netflix. By I think Reed Hastings of Netflix. I thought it was really cool. Wonderful. About innovation and how do you incentivize and build teams, with a unique culture. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll check that out. Sarah, do you have a book recommendation?
So I must admit, I've been a nerd. I've always been a nerd, but even especially during this pandemic, I've just been churning through books and I've been fascinated with just, the world that I'm in, right? Startup and venture capital. And this is a little bit of a cautionary tale, but Super Pumped by Mike Isaac is one I highly recommend about the rise and fall of Uber. Travis Kalanick and all that. And it's mind-boggling just the things that happen in Silicon Valley. Right now I'm reading Hashing Out Twitter, which is about the founding of Twitter and just the mess that it was and maybe is. But, I think I would recommend those two actually, just because it a lot of times we think that from the outside, as Aleksandra said, right, it looks great, but always ask further and always dive a little bit deeper. Challenge your own assumptions. And these books have challenged my own assumptions about growth, about innovation, about building, to unicorn, to IPO and all this, which is what I'm extremely fascinated by. So highly recommend those two for now.
Wonderful, thank you. Aleksandra, your turn.
From my perspective, it depends what you're using the reading for. So sometimes for me, reading is just an escape to relax. And then I like to read more novelty type of things. And the one that I remember, so I used to be a very slow reader and I read this book, although it's 500 pages within a few days. It so mesmerized me. And that was The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. And I think it's an interest. Yeah, exactly. And I think I think you can learn about human nature maybe in that book, or psychology or philosophy, more than sort of how to do business per se. But I found it to be really engaging and beautifully written. So that's why I enjoyed it so much. And I think sometimes it's important to also decompress and leave sort of the business world around you behind and have some reflection time by reading books that are other than that. But then, I mean, I love reading biographies for exactly the reason that was mentioned just now. I think when you read biographies of people who are incredibly successful or were incredibly successful, you think it was also easy, and turns out that actually they had to be incredibly resilient throughout their lives, and they had to overcome a lot of obstacles. And I think it motivates, and it makes me feel like I'm learning a lot from their journeys as well. So generally biographies I find very, and it can be anyone. It doesn't have to be someone from business or tech necessarily.
Have you read?
Can I add one more book?
Oh yes, more. Brilliant.
It just suddenly I just remembered the Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Yes.
Paulo Coelho.
Yeah, I think it means if you really want to do something, then the entire universe will conspire with you to make it happen. I know it sounds cheesy, but true. So I just had to add that. Yeah,
that's a really nice one to add. Thank you. This question's a little bit personal, but it was what was your favorite memory at King's, or what did you take away from King's looking back? I know it was maybe a while ago now, but
no, it was recent. What are you talking about?
You've all left a mark on King's, so what was some of your favorite memories?
That's a difficult one. Oh gosh. I think it must have been the free drinks sponsored by the law firm. No,
Aleksandra.
I'm joking. Gosh.
I have one. So, I some of you may notice, I think you know this, Mei-Ying, I was a flyer. I was a cheerleader for the King's Lions. And, at that time they were, I don't know how they're doing now, but they were excellent. I mean, we were winning competitions, and it was really pushing my gymnastic abilities. But I was a cheerleader, flyer, and the president of the business club at one point. And that was definitely a shift. Talk about transition. So I definitely it's always multifaceted, but I really remember that whole experience and how much I loved it, because, I could be whoever I wanted to be. And, I am still like that. Like, I like to party. I miss that a lot. I don't know if that will return. But Wednesday nights, I don't know if you still have this, but we would, yes. Because we're cheerleaders, I think, we, got entry to every club and had so much fun. What's that student club there's Guys Bar, and the other one, the student bar. What's it called?
Guys Bar is the main one on the Wednesday, the sports one, but
the one in Strand. Waterfront. The waterfront. Right?
The waterfront.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
I was no longer open. No, I'm shocked. Oh no. Okay, my age is sorry, but yeah. No, but I think, I love that sort of transition. And, we used to have like costume Wednesdays, and every Wednesday was a different theme. So I really enjoyed that. Nothing really meaningful, but I thought that was meaningful actually, because you as a student, you want to have fun, really. This is a time to really enjoy yourself and have good friends and party and do, try push yourself to the limits in terms of your even just, like I said, I was really I broke my arm actually in King's. So I still have a huge scar here. So that's a memory I definitely remember, but I broke my arm because I was cheerleading. But so that was me pushing the limits, which my father did not approve of. But I think in university, I have such fond memories, so many of them from all these things that I did.
Oh, that's lovely. Virginia, do you have anything that springs to mind?
For me, it's simple. Actually, the things that I loved about King's, I met, one of my best friends on the first day of I think our contract law class. She's still like one of my best friends, and we used to hang out after class at the Cafe Nero on the Waterloo Bridge.
Yes. So brilliant Cafe Nero.
So when I think of my days at King's, that I think I spent all of my money and all of my time at that Cafe Nero. After class. And the second thing was the law balls. The law balls. I went for every one of them and with our friends, and it was always so fun. So those are my best memories, I think.
I mean, just to make up for my initial drinks comment, I would add a slightly more serious one. What I actually really enjoyed, and this will make me sound like a total geek, but before exams, you would always go to the library. And for some reason, it was always the law students in there. I don't know why, but basically you ended up socializing all the time. So I'm not sure how much learning happened there, but it was a beautiful environment. We kept being told off for talking. But it's a beautiful library, and it has a nice atmosphere to it, and you would end up socializing with all your friends basically. So I have quite fond memories of that, because with lectures and tutorials you sort of come in and out, and maybe you don't get a chance to really chat, and here it was a bit more free flow. So I quite like that, actually.
Yeah, the morning is beautiful. That's certainly something that I miss with COVID. We only have a few more minutes left, but we do have quite an interesting question that came in from David about what is the typical investment process and how do you deal with sourcing and due diligence? Feel free to take if you have a...
Maybe I can get started then very briefly. So deal sourcing, I think, happens in many different ways. More and more, actually, VC funds are data-driven and have a data-driven approach. There are a lot of in-house tools that are being developed, but also third-party tools that are being used to really, look at a wider pool of people, potential founders, before they even found or before they are even ready to fundraise. This is particularly of interest to funds like ours, which is very early stage. However, a lot of the sourcing still happens through networks, and I think that shouldn't be underestimated, and through deep dives. So if there is a theme or topic that you feel particularly bullish about, and you think there's something happening in that space, you would take a look at the entire ecosystem and find the best players in that field. So I think that's my 2 cents on the sourcing. And in terms of how to do the deal, or how does the investment process work, I think it differs from VC to VC, but typically there is some sort of one-on-one conversation. There is an exchange of information such as deck, financials, cap table, etc. And then you follow on with a pitch to the entire team, some sort of internal discussion, more DD, and then you sort of present a term sheet if you want to go ahead. That was a very short that's that's roughly how we do it.
Left the important question to the last minute. So, Sarah or Virginia, do you have anything to add?
I'll add to that a little bit. So, a lot of times, so for example, for Teja Ventures, right, we source from, in 3 different ways, right. So, obviously we have, She Loves Tech, which is a massive, worldwide competition. So some of, we look at 3,000 to 5,000 deals a year just from that pipeline alone. One of my partners runs, Southeast Asia's largest angel investment network. So we look at another 3,000 deals from there a year. And then, of course, each of the partners, right, we're known in the industry for what we do. So people come to us actually, quite, just referrals, or people come to us actually organically. We also, if there are particular sectors that we really are focused on, I have a team who reaches out to founders regularly on LinkedIn, or, emailing them, just because, this is something that we want to look at, this happens on a weekly basis. In terms of actual diligence, right, like I said, I think each fund has their own sort of unique process, right? So, for us, I get my analysts essentially to screen things, we discuss that sort of once a week. And then once there are things we want to take forwards, we sit down with the founders. And then, basically it's an interaction process, it's a diligence process. And then, essentially, for those who don't know venture capital, we take it to an investment committee. Investment committee votes on the deal, and then we go back and we negotiate the terms of the deal, and then we do the deal, essentially. So that is actually the real meat, I think, of being an investor. And how you convince your IC to let you do the deal.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful insight. Thank you. Sarah, do you have any?
No, I think they covered it all. The only thing I would say is, it's interesting for us because we have sort of the eagle eye view of now, close to 100 funds. And what's been interesting is the fact that some funds, including one in Canada called Loyal VC, has intentionally removed the pitch process from the equation just to remove bias. And they've actually funded, I want to say 40% female founders through that, where they look at the traction of the company and the founder, from one milestone to another. And I think we're starting to see that. I think like Aleksandra was saying, being very data driven, the venture capital industry, from the 2 books that I recommend, if you read it, you already know, it's just, it's full of bias, right? It's who you know, it's who are you going to fund. And, if you think about what does a successful entrepreneur look like right now, if I ask you that question, I think the majority would still say, it looks like a little bit like Mark Zuckerberg. And
Jeff Bezos.
And Jeff Bezos, you look at the top 5 richest folks right now, they're all, they don't look like you and I or any of us on this call right now, which is unfortunate, right? But those are, and all of us are biased, including women. And Harvard did a study on this, which showed that, when you put a female entrepreneur and a male entrepreneur, they get asked different questions as well. So, I think it's, we're starting to really see this reckoning. And I think the venture capital industry, I'm encouraged that they're intentionally addressing these biases to fund the greatest entrepreneurs that may not, fit in the conventional bubble of what patterns of success look like, because the patterns of success did not include you and me in the past. So we're working on it. We're working hard, and I encourage all of you on the call to join the mission to really build for diversity and build for sustainability in the long run, because I think we need the best talent, and we need to reach everyone at this stage.
I completely agree that it is really lovely to see 3 powerful, really successful women on this and have a really insightful chat. That does bring question time to a close. And thank you so much for all of your wonderful answers. And I'm sure the students can take away so much, even the books, that they were brilliant. So if we didn't have time to answer your question, then please feel free to reach out to Aleksandra, Sarah, or Virginia through LinkedIn or through their contact information, which will be in the description of the YouTube live stream. I'd like to close this with a huge thank you to our speakers who have kindly given their time today to share their wisdom and experience with us. So I hope that you've all found this webinar as helpful as I have. And if you have any questions about King's Business Club or future keynotes, do not hesitate to get in touch and continue to comment questions in the comment section below, or send us a message over on Instagram at King's Business Club. Don't forget to share this webinar with your networks, and thank you so much for listening.